Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. We have a very nice panel and a very nice conversation to cover, a very nice topic to cover. But before we go through, before we jump into the conversation, we would like to share some words about who we are, who ProductTank is, and who Mind the Product is, and introduce you to our world. So Mind the Product actually is the largest community of passionate product managers. It was actually created by product people for product people with one mission, to actually push our craft together further. Now, the first ProductTank was actually created back in 2010 with only 25 people in the back of a pub in London. And since then, we actually have managed to grow to 150,000 members across 200 plus cities in meetups that we launch every month. And back in 2011, because we wanted to actually bring all those communities together worldwide, we actually funded Mind the Product. And today we are actually having a lot of conferences, in-person conferences in Hamburg, London, Manchester, San Francisco, and Singapore, next to all the digital conferences that we are covering worldwide. Now, as you have already seen, our topic for today is actually killing product features, which we tend to think that it's a topic that is not very often covered by the product community. And for this conversation, we have some very, very nice people and professionals joining us. Lucia?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making the time to dial in and listen to our session today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to the panelists. Christina, Gkofa, Head of Product Buyer Experience at Metro Markets. If you want to share a few words, Christina, about your experience.
Sure. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lucia and Christina, for the invitation. I'm super excited to be here and exchange with this nice panel on this quite interesting topic. Pretty sure that most of the product managers struggle on this one, like we all do. Basically, in the last 2 years, I am leading the buyer experience at Metro Markets, building the B2B marketplace for HoReCa customers. And my love for tech and products started in 2014. And since then, it has been growing and growing. And there's lots of learning. So I'm always super passionate to share some of those with a group of passionate people.
Thanks, Christina. Next, we have Gabriele Sabadini, Head of Product Management at TUI. Ciao, Gabri. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hey, ciao Juti. Hello from Milan. Nice to be in here. Thank you for the invite. I'm operating in one of the many divisions of TUI Group. As you know, TUI is a worldwide travel agency operating flights, cruises, accommodation, and in-destination experience. So basically, I try to match in our marketplace around things to do while you're on holiday, suppliers and the guests, through a set of B2C, B2B, B2B2C channels and loading channels as well for our suppliers. My journey into product management started roughly 10 years ago, and previously I kicked off my career as a software engineer. So the usual tech guy becoming a product guy, let me say it like that.
Thanks, Gabri. Thanks for making the time today. And last but not least, Keiji Adedeji, Head of Product at Thalys.
Hi, everyone. Hi, ProductTank Rotterdam. I'm absolutely delighted to be here as a first speaking engagement for me personally. So it's a good one to be doing. So a little bit about me. I've been in product for about 8 years, going on 9 years, and I'm in my first year of product leadership. So I'm really passionate right now about building empowered product teams, making sure that they are absolutely set up to do great product work. In my experience, though, I've kind of ridden those highs and lows that we all have as product managers. one of which is this topic that we've got, and actually getting to talk about that is a real pleasure. But this community is great. I also was one of the first product tanks outside of London, Product Tank Birmingham, which I've lovingly handed over to my co-curators now, so I'm not so much involved in it. But I think these forums are really great for having these discussions, and this is how I've built my product peers over the years. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us today, KG.
Thanks for joining, KG.
Yeah, and thank you all again for joining. In the audience, we'll be paneling and also taking some questions in between, so feel free to post them as the discussion flows. We'll try and insert them in the conversation. And I am happy to kickstart the panel. The first question is a bit of a broader one to begin with, and it's about how we decide to build something rather than something else. How do we decide as product teams to push a feature live rather than another one? Christina, do you have some thoughts on this?
Wow, lots of thoughts on this. I think it's not a one time or one criterion that depends on. Lots of things come into play. I mean, from the top of my head, I would say it highly depends on the strategy that the company has, on the vision of the product that your team has or the department has. So you start to do this kind of sanity check in the beginning of, would it help us add any value or drive us towards where we want to go? Always a complexity comes into play. So you start to weigh things like, is the effort that we're actually putting into this feature basically justifying the value that we get out of it? How fast can we get value out of it? And then I would say, last but not least, you somehow start to compare if this is a must feature. Is it something where users are struggling with? So if you introduce it, you alleviate this pain. Or if it's rather something that's nice to have that can rather wait for another quarter, another 6 months. Yeah, that's what I would say as fundamentally basic to choose from.
Thanks. Anyone else wants to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in early. So as Christina said, I think this is quite a big question. We could probably spend an entire talk, product time talking on this one alone. But I'd say that certainly what Christina said there is absolutely spot on. You know, you have to look at what are your goals and what are the objectives that you're driving towards, and what are the outcomes as a product team that you're trying to deliver. Do they actually marry up to those goals? But then it comes down to, you know, doing the process and going through discovery to validate the problems. You have to validate that it's the right problem in the first place. When you've validated a number of right problems, you then have to prioritize which are the ones that are going to deliver the most value or move the needle the most for you. And then once you've decided that, it's then the process of, okay, what are all the ways we could solve this problem, and thinking about your solution opportunities, and again, validating those with the customer at the end. So it's really about making sure you're aligned with your goals, making sure that you're validating those problems and validating the value that you're trying to deliver. And you're really clear and aligned with your team on that, on what are your desired outcomes and what are the metrics for that. So when you're building something, you know what you're going to deliver value-wise at the other end, and you can actually measure it. I think that's really important, especially when we talk about things that, you know, exist and we need to kill them. Well, why did they get like that in the first place? You know, how are we going to know if something's working?
Thanks, KG. Yeah, when you build something, you should know that it delivers value once live, but sometimes it's not really the case. So, Gabri, maybe you want to elaborate a bit on what are the signs of an underperforming feature once it's live?
Yeah, I think on top of the discussion before, we should add also the, let's say, maturity level of the stage of the company, right? So how much you can afford to do the discovery is also how much of money you have left in the bank. So that's particularly challenging for startups, let's say. The same goes for delivery. So you have to find the sweet spot based on your company stage, right? And based on that, how much you want to jiggle from one to the other, right? And actually the same goes for the killing of a feature, right? So let's say that you could be a mature company or an early stage, and it really changes a lot because you need to pivot on one direction, and so you're going to basically start from scratch with your product, let's say, and maybe reuse, some tech enablers you have. You are not going to throw away your team. Maybe they are, I don't know, skilled engineers on search, and you are about to deliver a different, let's say, way of displaying those search results. The other hand, you have, let's say, in these maturity metrics, you also have to consider the type of customers you are playing with. So let's say you can be stuck with one big B2B customers, right? And now your company is 10 years old. You've been relying a lot on that customer, and now, well, you're kind of regretting to letting go, but well, you're investing a lot in that, and it's just a custom feature. So you are like disrupting your platform in order to accommodate that need, which, yes, it's pouring money in, but well, it's, I don't know, maybe it's a lot of product debt or a lot of technical debt, right? So I think that besides company strategy, the other factor to pull in is the maturity level of the company, right? So it gives a lot of direction in terms of how much we can afford to keep something alive and fully functional.
Okay, we have a question. It relates to sort of preventing building features that don't make a lot of sense or don't end up delivering a lot of value. So it taps on something that you mentioned, Gabri. So how do you validate before you build for B2B, where experimentation is not really an option? So I think it taps into what you were saying, where you don't have a lot of time or resources, or just maybe the crowd to do validation in B2B. Do you have, or any of you have an example on how do you prevent features from failing with validation for B2B specifically?
I can speak to that, I think. So I think in B2B, and it can vary because there's varying types of B2B as well. So I absolutely think experimentation is possible in B2B, but I understand the environments where it's not also. So the approach there is really taking a customer validation approach. The idea of development partnerships works in B2B. So when you've done some validation, you've understood the segments that you're dealing with, you find some good prospect customers, and you work with them on a development partnership basis. So, what you're looking for there is not to build something that's custom to those people. What you're looking for is that those customers are representative of the segment. So really, you should be building something for your segment and not going down the custom, unique route for every customer, which is not really going to get you anywhere on a B2B product.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the concept of working with the sponsor could help. So find a sponsor customer that can help you validate within their pool of users.
Indeed.
Yeah,
as you mentioned, KG, the whole topic, I mean, it's very extensive, and we can indeed spend a whole product tank to discuss it. But I do think that with B2B, people do find it a bit more difficult to actually validate and move forward. But if we go back to the killing the feature, AF feature conversation, do you think that when actually approaching the topic of killing a feature, or when deciding to kill a feature, we should approach it on a unilateral level, so totally individual, excluding the whole product, or should we actually look at it from a product perspective and how the feature fits into the product itself?
I see lots of nodding, so jump.
Christina, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think both. On one side, you definitely need to look at it. So zooming out and looking at the product perspective, and you need to do that anyway. You're kind of forced in a way, because you are considering again, what is the company strategy? What are the objectives? What's the product vision? So then you basically brainstorm and come up with the list of endless features that might be helping you towards that. And then let's say you do the necessary discovery and you decide for feature A and B. Then once you go into the process, basically you start going more into details. You start gaining more user insights. You understand what works for the customers in the end. Maybe their needs are changing also as you're implementing certain things. So you always need to do that check again of, are we going in the right way? And the combination is actually helping, because you might end up in saying, we're not killing the feature, it's still the right feature, but we need to change the UX, for example. We need to change the scalability of it because it cannot really scale like this, or we need to remove the technical debt that we have accumulated. So definitely both helps so that you can reach the best decision for you at that point in time. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
Jump in.
Sure thing. I absolutely agree with that. I think this is one of those answers that questions that has a classic product manager answer, which is it depends. So it absolutely depends. I think taking that bird's eye view and looking unilaterally to make sure that you're not having any impacts across the board, and how you go through that in the validation process is really important. But I think you should, one way to look at it is to think upstream and downstream from the feature that you're looking at. So what's happening upstream that in your user's journey that leads to that point, and what's happening downstream from your user's journey that leads to that point. So some features are so small you could probably take it out and not have to consider everything. But some things you maybe want to do some discovery and look into the user behaviors. What are the funnels that your customers are taking, and at what point is that? What touch point is this particular feature? And that can impact whether you're taking a unilateral approach or whether you're like, actually, this thing can be standalone and we can rip that out.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with both your points. For sure, there is still the holistic ingredient in the recipe. So the question would be how we ended up having this, which is not adding value, right? So there must have been a good reason in the past, or it was just by chance, or either I'm altering the current UX in the product, right? So I don't know. Usually you have a lot of legacies in transactional emails or on push notifications, right? So yeah, this on top, we will cover and figure out it later, or how to remove it. Simply things, or you have, let's say, not so happy decision to make. So emails and push notification, is something maybe your product can live without if you are not in a period of full expansion. So you're not focusing on growth, for example, right? But maybe you are not nailing down the pricing part, for example. So your revenue stream on the product is by selling subscriptions, and the way you have nailed down the value proposition actually doesn't work, and that's because of a part of the user journey. So again, it's data, quantitative and qualitative. Yeah. So the bad point about this is that from a, let's say, beard eye or third person point of view, everything works like a charm, right? In the book, everything works. In the reality, you have some also feelings connected to that. So it's either, I've invested so many time in building this. How it comes that now we want to kill it? Are you crazy? It costed the company like 2 quarters. I've worked overnight because I firmly believe that this is going to work, and now we are saying we're killing it. Are you crazy? So there are also that kind, let's say, of human touch to add to the discussion, which I think is not to underestimate.
So Peter is actually raising a very nice question, I think, which is relevant to the key phases of the killing a feature conversation, B2B SaaS. what do you think those phases are?
I think there's a discovery phase. So how do you understand how is that feature actually performing? What are its desired outcomes and how is it performing against them? That's the information that feeds into you knowing that it's something that should be killed. So I'd say that that's probably one of the starting points, is something's led you to think this feature needs to be killed, and that's probably some discovery on your part to actually identify its performance.
Yeah, and you can also A/B test switching off features, actually. So let's say login walls, for examples, right? So you can have them, and then you decide, well, in order to foster the growth ratio of the product, I want to leave this feature out from the login wall. So it's not a feature killing per se, but you are removing or adding walls between your user and your product. So you can also do experimentations around that. So discovery plays a role both on creating and on destroying features. I totally agree, Kenji.
Yeah.
I think you also need to then think about an impact analysis. So what's the impact of taking this feature away, particularly in B2B? Even if it's an underperforming feature, you realize that it does need to be killed. Let's say you've made that decision. Despite the fact it's underperforming, somebody is going to be using it. And depending on the nature of the B2B organization and your customers, it's not the sort of thing you can just, despite the fact most people aren't using it. There's this one, the company I work for, we make software for universities, which are, they have these processes that are long and archaic, and taking something out is but it's in the middle of term. So you have to really consider the customer's context, despite the fact that it's an underperforming feature, you've got to take that out. What's the impact of this? What you have to do that analysis phase of figuring out the implications for A, the business, and B, the customer, or rather A, the customer and B, the business, in order to then plan how you're going to do that and how you're going to communicate what's happening as well to customers.
Yeah, and I think that's what Peter was referring to. How do you engage in that conversation with your stakeholders, and how do you sort of break it down for them? And communication is key, but I don't know if someone can tap into this with an example.
Yeah, maybe there is one. So let's say what has helped our product management teams in the past is start with the user journey, also in B2B, right? So start by doing a mapping of the process. And so starting really from the process, not from, so let's say from the jobs to be done, if it's more fashionable nowadays, right? So start from there and avoid following the pure UX process, because if you just follow the UX process, nobody's going to say, nah, I'm not going to need this. But if you stick on the real user journey, so what I'm trying to accomplish, then it's totally a different thing. And so that usually helps if you cannot factor in metrics, for example, which, as KG was mentioning, maybe on B2B, you have, the hypo as stakeholders, highest paid person in the room, and saying, no, this is going to kill my revenue line, because without that feature, that key client is not going to be happy. It's not a matter of the feature. Whoever logs into your B2B product simply has a task to be done. So find out that task, stick on the mapping, and highlight how badly the feature you want to kill is impacting the process.
Yeah.
So, Gabri, this is what I was going to actually say, because I think the reality out there is that most of the organizations, unfortunately, they do not understand the concept of user flows, user journeys, validation, even, right? Jobs to be done. And then you also get on top of that the hypo effect, right? How do you actually deal with that? Because it's a very interesting conversation overall to kill a product feature, but then how do you tackle that on top of the maturity level of an organization?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and then I invite Keji and Christina to to take part. I think that the secret ingredient, let's say, so there is no silver bullet, of course, but product management is a job of relationships. So you have to engage with the relevant people in your organization and keep them engaged. So let's say, as product managers, we are all fond of frameworks, ways of thinking, ways of representing the reality, right? But then you get to the salesman or to the marketing guy, and she is like, hey, yes, I have to do this. So I don't care about jobs to be done or impact mapping, right? But let's try to sit at the table and map the complexity and feel them part of the process. So let's take the example of an account executive. Hey, I want to sit down with one of your customers, and the value here is that we spice up the connection again. So it's been an inactive contract, and by citing your end user for your customer, we try to engage with him or her again in order to show that we care about their problems, that we care about the fact that they are slow today in a search process or in a content creation process, right? So the key is, to me, engagement. So stop the buzzwords also from the product management spheres and do the tough job of the homeworks, right? Connection and some really need work together with your best buddies, which are stakeholders indeed, in that scenario of B2B.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you both said. So for me, it's a bit of a combination of everything. It's quite important phase is to definitely understand what type of feature do you have, what's the maturity stage, what type of product are we talking about, so that this then actually helps you to understand how much do I even need to engage, and what would be the communication strategy. So in digital products, and especially B2C, I think quite often it's easy to say, okay, I just pull that Band-Aid off. I just remove the feature, see what happens. Sometimes nothing happens. So that's great, especially if you don't have big functionalities tied behind the feature. But then often you have to, let's say, take the middle road of either stripping it down a little bit. So what I like to call the haircut approach, where you actually trim a bit here, trim a bit there. In the end, it's not a shock for neither stakeholders or customers, but at least now you've put it in shape. Or the other way that I personally prefer, because it gives you this time of what you were talking about, KG, of basically seeing what are the things I need to take into consideration. It's the slow transitioning from old to new.
Yeah,
probably you've seen it quite often with Jira, for example, or other platforms as well, where they introduce this new feature, way of working, workflow, whatever, but they do give the customers, the products, the teams, the time of actually transitioning. And that really shapes then your communication strategy as well. For me, communication is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So it can either save you in this phase or really drag you down. Yeah. How soon you involve the relevant departments, be it customer service, knowing how to deal with complaints, be it how do you reach out to customers via email to inform them about what's coming, and how do they navigate in the new experience. Quite important things there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, and I also love that analogy of the haircut approach. I'm going to start using that. But communication, and particularly your customer success and customer service teams, are your friend at the point where you've made that decision to kill a feature. They absolutely are your friends. But earlier in the process, how do you start the conversation? Well, again, communication and making sure that you really do foster those relationships with the stakeholders. Transparency is important. There's a series of things that we've done that's led to this decision. Over communicate and be super transparent about the reasons and the why, and actually, if there's an alternative, what we're doing instead. Especially where, as you say, there's different, killing a feature can mean different things. Do you have a sunset period? Are you dual running with a replacement? Or is it just, it's, skull and crossbones, it's dead, which, as you mentioned, in B2C, you might see that more often. Or is it that actually we're replacing this thing with something better, but we can't just switch it off, so we're going to dual run the two things for a while? Depending on which of those it is, your communication strategy might be different, but some things remain the same about it. You need to really be aligned with people and transparent about the decision making that led to that point, and make customer success and your customer facing teams your friends in the communication process.
Okay, thanks. I'm enjoying this, and the audience is too. We're getting compliments. So yeah. So let's get to the meat. When is the last time you guys had to kill a feature? Spill the beans. Tell us how painful it was, and what happened. How did you approach it? How did you realize? We want the full story from the beginning till the end.
Okay, this year we finally sunset, like literally at the end of last year, we sunset, and this year we've now pulled out all, most of the code underneath. A pretty cool area of one of our products. So we have a course resource list management tool for universities, higher education, and that's the part of the product that like millions of students go to every day. So when a faculty member, a professor says, this is our course, and here's the books, articles, journals, everything that you've got to read for this course, our tool is the thing that students see. So we really had to, it wasn't something we could ever just replace, because universities are big and they have their processes for how they roll things out, which varies from university to university. They have how they prefer to train their faculty members. And of course, you've got term times to consider as well. We are in different time zones, in different regions. So the academic cycle actually crosses over at certain points. So in the UK and Europe, you've got kind of September to July. But then in Australia, they kind of start in like January to, that point later in the year. So there were a lot of considerations about how this would be done. We went for the dual run approach in the end. The thing I'd say that we failed at spectacularly in this is when we decided on that approach, we were not very specific about the timeline for that. So it just meant universities were like, well, no, we absolutely cannot switch to the new one yet because all of the reasons, and then this one will say the same, but for all of the reasons that are completely different from that other one. So we ended up in just this mire of, trying to push people along and get them going. And it took about 2 years to get the switch over. The new version was there, it was working, people were using it, even in universities that were saying, oh, we don't want to switch it off yet. And we're like, but we know your faculty are using it. We can see that they're actually using the new version. That conversation just took too long. So the advice I'd give there is be really clear about, if you take that approach, what is your sunset period, and be really clear about that. Obviously, be flexible and consider the context of your customers. We're not going to turn it off in the middle of term in January. Absolutely not. But, everyone's off in September, in July. And there's the summer. So let's set a date where we know that no one's going to be doing anything. Would be the advice I gave there. Sorry, that was very long.
No, super insightful. And I guess sometimes it helps if at some point the stakeholder can see what's in it for them. So I guess a good concept to always work with is to show the added value that the new can bring versus the old.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thing is, we had great feedback that the new version was great, but it was just the timing thing for a lot of universities.
Yeah. Gabri, do you want to share?
Yeah, I was thinking about all the tremendous failures. So I was trying to sort out which one is less terrible. Yeah. So now, let's say recently, let's say today we have 2 discussions around killing 2 different features, but I won't be mentioning them. So let's dive deep a little bit on the past. We decided to change the way we run the classification of some products, right? So in that case, you have to understand the impact mostly. So it's like some kind of content management feature change, but which impacts downstreams, whatever you want to, from conversion rate to the capability of partners to run integrations, right? So in that scenario, planning in terms of times, as Keji was saying, was dramatic, and also ensuring backwards compatibility before phasing off the feature, and communicating both timing and backwards compatibility compliance was a key to the success of the initiative. So no regrets, we're going to change, you're going to be safe, stay with us, some cuddles, and everything's going to be good. Don't tremble. So that was the approach. It seems to work so far, so finger crossed.
And Gabby, from a stakeholder perspective, what do you think are the main fear points? Is it just the fear of the new and the unknown? Is it the fear that they need to learn something new, or?
Well, yeah. So you have a variety of aspects related to change management, right? And to the way you handle biases in people or even in departments, right? So the fear of the change or the cost. So you have to factor in also if you are touching something from, let's say, a configuration point of view, right? So your product is devoted to a single department. For example, I'm building a feature for customer service, right? And then, yes, I fear that, yeah, I've asked you to improve this, but I'm not so sure because, yes, I have some regrets today, but we have to get acquainted to it. We have to get used to it. And then they see that you have not just improved the way the web page looks, but we have to consider the end-to-end value. And then, so for example, you are acting on a page, and before getting to that page, you are requesting an input. The way you request that input could be a search, an upload of file, and so whatever you want, right? And if you also improve another part of the process, this, well, is not usually factored in by stakeholders, and they say, oh, wow, yes, I didn't think about that, but now that I see it, having a search performed differently before, what we are actually going to change is going dramatically to solve my life. So again, it's a matter of really mapping the process when you're talking about those type of features. So engage with your stakeholders, communicate with them. The usual bias the product manager has is, oh, stakeholders are my enemy, I have to fight with them. No, they are like the rock thanks to which you can build a wall around your castle. So try to stick with them as much as possible.
The rock they are.
They are stubborn as a rock, but you can
some really good analogies this evening.
Christina, do you also want to share an example? Do you have anything to hand?
I will also go a little bit in the past, so 2 years ago, because in the last 2 years with Metro Markets, we have been focusing on building and building, so we haven't killed much yet. I will go to 2 years ago. Basically, it was, and it's one that I remember quite a lot because it's one of the most difficult times when the feature was basically built before your time in the company. So you're kind of inheriting it as well. The team, however, that had built it was there. And they had been focusing on building it for 1 year or so. And basically, let's say the feature had the dual purpose. On one side, it was, let's say, an advertising area for certain brands, so they could really promote themselves and why their brand is really good and have their content and all of that. So it was their real estate. And on the other side, it had to be interesting for the user, right? So they had to be engaging and actually reading this content, find it useful, and so on. Now, the feature was actually built below the fold of the page that you would see on the homepage. So basically, users would never scroll and would never click on it, right? And the issue we had was that we interviewed a couple of users, and they also said that they would never search for this type of feature in such a way. So everything was going towards we have to kill it. internally everyone knew that we had to, but then they felt like, oh, but we really spend 1 year on this, and how are we killing it? How are we removing it? How will we do that? Does it mean we didn't focus on the right thing? So there was lots of time spent into convincing people and also soothing that it's not a failure. It's good that we know. Of course, even though there was a specific time frame communicated when we kill it, when the day came, people were also a bit surprised of, oh, so we're doing it in the end, aren't we? So that was fun. But in the end, what worked was what you mentioned, Lou, that basically there was an alternative. So the stakeholders internally were panicking a bit because since the brands were looking at this as their real estate to project themselves, what would we give them? So we came up with a different feature that had its own landing page and that the users would find value in. Also that we could basically build in 2 sprints. So 1 month, much less. We cleaned up all that fantastic legacy code that no one wanted to see. But it was quite an experience. But the good thing is that after that, it felt that people felt more comfortable with actually spotting those things and then basically saying, maybe we should really consider the cost of maintenance here and how much value it brings. So in the end, it was a good thing for the company.
So the byproduct of wasting a lot of money, time, and resources and realizing that was not bringing or delivering value taught the business and the stakeholder.
You never consider that, right? So people think, well, we actually spent some time building it. And then if you actually say, so if we spend another half a year of maintaining this, we could build feature A, B, C, and D in the meantime that would bring like 10 times revenue or whatever the KPI is for the product. And then they start to realize that, oh, me coding is also actually like work that we throw away or designing a solution. So yeah, you have to reflect on it a lot, I think. And it takes some time, but then teams start to get that mindset.
Yeah. I really love what you said at the end there, because I think it's about how do we normalize this conversation? How do we normalize the cost of supporting failing features? How do we normalize that it's okay to fail? And how do we normalize what we need to do is learn faster, so we don't just let things languish for this long and then suddenly, 2 years later or whatever it is, that's when we're fixing the problem. So if that's the outcome that's being teased out from that conversation, then I think that can only be a good thing going forward. We'll probably, all that soul searching means we'll probably ask better questions before we build the thing in the first place. But also we will be keeping an eye out for things that are underperforming more and really asking that question of what's it costing us to keep this going.
Yeah, and also you have to, let's say, take in consideration your autonomy as a team, right? So we are not always 100% focused on P&L, let's say. So how much the company is investing into your team, right? But depending on the level of autonomy your team has and on transparency, you have the ownership, right? And so with ownership come the duties to, let's say, disclosure the amount of time and so on invested in the company into one direction, which could be misleading. So we are investing X into Z. What if we invest X into Y and we deliver something different, right? So I think we tend to forget sometimes the financial aspect. But as you grow in leadership, money and budgeting starts more and more take the table, right? So don't forget that.
And you also realize that it takes one person to start the conversation, and then others will just jump to it and say, oh, finally someone said it. So one thing that I've seen, at least, is that unfortunately killing features doesn't happen often because the right culture is not in place, the right mindset. Very often product managers feel that, it's the failure aspect, not only in terms of negative consequences. Hopefully no one is getting fired, right? But about how is my team then perceived for killing a feature that wasn't a success. And I think at least the product leaders have the duty to embrace this type of culture, that the sooner we know, the better. It's a learning, and then you extrapolate and replicate that effect to the rest of the company. I think that's the only way, to be honest, to actually foster those type of discussions and exchange often on those things.
So, Christina, this is actually a very nice bridge to my next question. Before I jump to that, I would like to mention that actually Daniele also loves the haircut approach. So you actually made it. You launched a very successful analogy tonight. But to your point, indeed, it's like, we do not have the culture of, dealing with failure. And at the end of the day, I would like you to elaborate also, Gabri and KG, on the 3 tips you would share with the audience to actually structure the aftermath of an unsuccessful feature launch.
I think a retrospective with the team that launched it, and a playback. So not just do the retrospective to talk about what we learned, even in failure, what did we do well, and then being super transparent about that and playing that back to the organization, so that they are hearing this language of, we failed, but this is what we learned from it, and this is how we are actually going to go forward. So you said 3 tips there. That was 2: a retrospective, a playback, and maybe I'll come back to me for my 3rd one. I need to have to think about that.
I think it was implied, which was engagement and communication towards the broader organization. So not just keeping it for yourself as an internal learning, but like continuously share, so that as a byproduct, the culture of the organization is also welcoming more risk-taking type of approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that gave me time to think, KG. Nice. So I think I have my 3. So the first one would definitely be, and it ties a little bit to the culture thing I was mentioning before, to really see it as a learning. It happens to everyone. Very successful companies also have those phases as well, and they grow stronger out of them. It's just part of the journey. I think that's quite important, so that the team then doesn't have this phase where they're all frustrated, not motivated, but rather really see that, okay, nothing happens. I mean, we learn from it. How do we go forward? Second is what you mentioned, KG. So really spend the time to understand what went wrong. Don't rush it. Was it the product? Was it the customer segment? Was it that you didn't spend enough time in discovery? Poor tech execution could also be the reason. So deep dive into talking to the customers, looking at the data again and again, and really understanding what is it that we took the wrong turn to, and how do we navigate back to our path. And the last one would be improve and return stronger. So once you know what it is, change your product messaging or sales strategy or pricing or promotion, depending on the product or feature, and just come back, rise from the ashes and come back stronger.
I like the positive.
I'm loving these analogies tonight.
You're killing it.
Yeah, you're killing it, Christina. You're just
killing it, literally.
Gabri, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I was wondering about the topic of the next product tank, if it's going to be about analogies.
It has to, right?
I dare you, Gabri. You drive ProductTank Milan, no? So I dare you.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good point. Yeah. So I think you really have to structure and to go out and say, yes, this was a failure and we decided to kill it for this reason, and to structure that. Why? Because this gives you, let's say, exposures, and with exposures, you are reinforcing your responsibility. So you're not just smiling in the stages when everything is good and you see 2 times, 3 times growth, but you're also taking responsibility, and your team is going to appreciate that when things go south, basically. So one thing is, okay, it's a failure. First, think about a date when you are going to communicate it, and to who in the company. Then how to communicate it. So let's think about if the failure is due to, well, you build the wrong thing to start with. So no validation in any form, and, well, bad investment. Or it was good enough, but wrong launch, for example. So yes, it's a failure. We're going to give a try at the next seasonality is possible, for example, right? Or you have an audience problem. So your audience has changed in the meanwhile. Those are all good reasons. What is the point behind here? Everybody wants to know the why. Everybody wants to know if they can trust you as a product manager, right? So have you done your homework? Let's say it's a bit blunt, but it's actually what the audience is looking for, since the company is trusting you as a product manager to steer the investment into the right direction, right? So they want to understand if you have understood something from the failure, and why, since you seem so smart, why you ended up with so bad decisions in first place. So that's really a matter of being transparent and to communicate it properly. So everybody is capable of saying in insight, yes, I would have done this and that, but you really have to explain the process your team has gone through in order to decide that, in order to find spot on what has gone wrong. So it's a matter of learning and exposing that learning. And of course, before point 2, you would have to do some more work, right? Like preparing for it, and in retrospective, like Kaji was saying. So that would be my 3 points.
Nice.
Nice.
Thank you. And with this, I think we can wrap up. Almost an hour of nice conversation. And well, thanks everyone for your time. Thanks panelists, Gabri, Christina, Keiji, for your wisdom and analogies. Thanks to the audience for being there today. Don't forget to sign up to ProductTank to get informed on the next events. And we are also on Meetup. And till next time. Thank you.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so
If
much.
it's not about analogies, then I'm pretty sure we're going to find another topic that is very rarely discussed within the product community. I really enjoyed it.
If it is about analogies, you only need Christina, because she's the queen.
Yeah.
She's the queen. Yeah.
I'm going to step out. I mean, she said Phoenix, right, from the ashes.
Yeah.
And haircut, and I came up with stone, right? So I'm totally opposite.
No, this has been really great, and it's been actually really great to hear the insights from Christina and you, Gabby, as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for the feedback from the audience.
Same.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.